Welcome to the Savage Nation. Welcome again to the Savage Nation. If you care to join the chat, you can do so on YouTube, on X, on Facebook. War and peace. All wars come to an end, not to the satisfaction of all parties. In fact, if you study history going back to, I guess, Neolithic times, man has been fighting man, usually over territory or resources, which is one and the same. In some cases, wars have been fought over religious beliefs, which ultimately come down to territory and resource. Today, we are seeing the end of two major conflicts on the planet owing to the remarkable will of Donald Trump. I believe that we will see Gaza, Hamas, Israel come to a point of equilibrium, not to the satisfaction of many. I believe that the Ukraine-Russia slaughterhouse will cease spilling blood onto the minds of mankind, and not to the satisfaction of some bloodthirsty mercenary types who are in the business of war and profiting from war, although they claim they're in the business of peace. They are not in the business of peace. So today's discussion, from my point of view, Ukraine, Gaza, and Sitting Bull. It's a big leap for many people. Why do I link a great leader of the Lakota tribe, Sitting Bull, who surrendered to the U.S. Army on July 20th, 1881 at Fort Buford, Dakota Territory. The reason he surrendered after a period of refuge in Canada with a small group of his own people is because of dwindling food supplies and disease. And Sitting Bull eventually had to surrender with 45 men, 67 women, and 73 children. Many wanted Sitting Bull to fight to the death, like you probably want Zelensky to kill every Ukrainian, so you'll be happy. It'll make better ratings for Fox News to keep the war going on. You may recall Sitting Bull was the mastermind of the Battle of Little Bighorn and was the significant mastermind in the Lakota victory at Little Bighorn, but he was not a strategic leader in the battle. That's where, as you well know, what happened at Sitting Bull. Pardon me, as you know, what happened at the Little Bighorn battle, Custer was killed and his men were killed. And then, of course, the army got so pissed off that they sent in more men and chased Sitting Bull out of his own territory, and he had to go to Canada, and he couldn't survive in Canada. Scarce resources, there were not as many buffalo, and the people were starving to death. So he surrendered in exchange for amnesty for himself and his followers at Fort Buford. That's what Sitting Bull did. And he was held as a prisoner of war at Fort Randall in South Dakota for 2 years. They didn't kill him. After his release, Sitting Bull was allowed to live on the Standing Rock Reservation. There's a lot more to the story for those of you who want to follow it. You could look up Sitting Bull. He was the one of the leaders in the wake of the Battle of Little Bighorn, where Custer and his men were killed. Not a pleasant story. Any more less pleasant than Israel, Gaza, Hamas, Ukraine, Russia, Zelensky, and Putin. Death and destruction. Now, there are those in the media who do not understand what war is. I have never fought in war, but I've lived a long enough life to have studied war from the time I was a child. Ask any warrior if they love war. The real warriors say no. It's those in the media and those on social media who sit in their pajamas in the basement who egg on wars. And of course, the munitions manufacturers and such. No one else wants a war. So you have both situations, which is Gaza, Russia, which no doubt is coming to an end. Trump finally said enough killing, enough killing, enough killing, and he's going to meet with Putin this week. Whether or not he will invite the minor leader of this small territory called Ukraine to the meeting is another story. I don't think he will, because Putin will not sit with the comedian, not at this point. So the estimated number of casualties, if not deaths, is 2 million people in Ukraine, not enough for those on Fox News and the munitions manufacturers. They have a guy on Fox News. Every time I see him, I want to grab the television and throw it in the river, in the bay. He looks so serious. I think his name is Keane, General Keane. If you look him up, he's a lobbyist for one of the major U.S. defense manufacturers, yet Murdoch has this man on right after talking about Ukraine and Russia and any other war on the planet. And the man, you could almost see the salivation coming out of his lips as he talks about more weapons, more weapons, more weapons. How dumb can people be? So what does Sitting Bull have to teach us? All wars come to an end, whether they be Napoleonic wars. He was a great victor in many battles, and then he was defeated. Napoleon eventually was defeated. Virtually all leaders have to face surrender or defeat, as we did in Vietnam, by the way, whether you know it or not. Whatever the reasons. Oh, sorry for my charm is jumping around on my jacket, so I'm going to bury my Navajo charm. So, what is the justification for taking over all of Gaza by the extreme right in Israel? I think it's the greatest mistake that Israel will have ever made. I think that it will induce hatred for Israel and the Jews for 100 years, if not more. And I think that there was a solution that could have been justified months ago with much less destruction and death in Gaza, especially amongst the people who live in Gaza. And yet the extreme right in Israel, the most religious nutcases, justify the expulsion of those in Gaza out of the Gaza Strip of land, moving them to God knows where. Egypt doesn't want them. Nobody wants them. We're going to move them to Libya. Okay. It reminds me very much of the expulsion of the Jews in the biblical times. And how the Jewish people in Israel, by the way, they're totally against the taking of Gaza City by Netanyahu and his military. Most of the military is opposed to it. They're worn out, they're tired, they're sick of it. But I understand that this is a battle to the death. I do understand that. I don't live there, but I understand. But there's another element to it that you must not ignore, which is that the October 7th massacre in Israel by those from Gaza, the Hamasniks, I do not think could have happened in a vacuum. I'm sorry, I read too many reports in the early days that leave too many questions for me as an American that are not answered. Too many questions. There were young women in the IDF on watch stations, lookout stations, towers over the Gaza fence, who were reporting strange activity, unusual activity. I read reports where they were threatened with court-martial by their commanding officers if they didn't stop sending those reports. And I'll let that hang in the air. I mean, we know that there are rumors to this day that FDR knew the Japanese were going to attack at Pearl Harbor, but let it happen in order to justify war against Japan, not because he was a warmonger, but he knew that eventually it would happen anyway, and he figured better sooner than later. I've heard those reports. We've heard that Netanyahu, who we know has held on to power for far too long. I totally believe in term limits, and I believe that power corrupts. I don't care where it occurs, Russia, Israel, any despotic nation on earth. Wherever there are no term limits or rigged elections, what you have is a dictatorship, and the people suffer. Israel has had Netanyahu in office for too long. I don't care whether you consider him a great man or an ungreat man or a this or a that. He's been in power too long, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Lord Acton said that a long time ago. But what I say has no bearing whatsoever. I'm just an American observer and commentator on world events. Take it for what it is, one man's opinion. I was not on the ground. I did not have relatives who were raped, mutilated, and murdered by these throwback bastards on October 7th. Whether or not it was permitted to happen is almost irrelevant. But now it's gone on too long. And there was an opportunity to end this Gaza-Israel war a long while ago. And I read the reports and the theories, the ideas rather. One was to create a demilitarized zone along the entire Gaza Strip on the border with Israel, make it an impenetrable border, neutral zone. No one would cross it, no man's land. And carve out northern Gaza, make it part of Israel, and then resupply, rebuild Gaza for the people who live there. I read that. But now the maximalist element of the Israeli population, which comprise a very small percentage of the overall Israeli population, the ultra, and not all ultra, but the ultra-religious Jews, want all of those in Gaza thrown out. And I've seen the justification. Netanyahu himself is broadly being criticized, both at home and abroad, with this new Gaza plan to take control of Gaza City. It will further kill Palestinian civilians. Israeli hostages will be killed. Israel's warriors are tired. They're going to be killed. Israel's international isolation will get much worse. The condemnation from longstanding European allies, from Arab governments, the families of hostages held by Hamas and others in Gaza, show that Netanyahu's move to take over Gaza City is not really that popular. Israel is isolated in the world right now. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed. There's a widespread hunger crisis. You can blame it on Hamas or not. I could argue both ways. I could argue that there's a little bit of both. Maybe Hamas stole the supplies. Maybe Israel calculated by starving the people, they would force the people to rise up against Hamas. Whatever the calculation is, we don't really know. I do know that many in Israel do not want this war to go on. We do know that Germany has cut off weapons supplies to Israel. We know all about this. But we see that Israel's national interest right now is in the hands of basically one small group, which is the Netanyahu group. As I said, it could be done in another way. The extreme right justifies this. I understand that. They say that Israel, with Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, take up 0.2% of the Middle East, which is kind of a false argument. And then they say the Arabs with 22 countries have 99.8% of the land, but there's only one Jewish state. I've seen the argument, but it's a false argument. We hear that there are over 50 Muslim countries, and that these countries could absorb the Arabs of Gaza, Judea, and Samaria into the Arab countries of the Muslim world. We've read that. We know that argument. And we know that we've heard the argument that the Jews have a right to a small state on all of their ancestral homeland. Well, that's to be debated. We do know that over 1 million Jews, you probably don't know this, it's not well known, were expelled from the Muslim world in the 1940s. The Jews had lived there before Islam existed. And we're talking about the Jewish population of Morocco, Algeria, and the countries in the northern crescent of Africa had a Jewish presence going back before Islam existed. And over 1 million Jews were thrown out and their land and possessions stolen by the governments at the time. That was called population transfer. I don't know what the long-term effect will be of this cleansing of the Arab population, to use a very ugly term. But I don't think there will be more long-term stability. I think in the end, there's almost no chance for peace one way or the other. Personally, I'm extremely pessimistic about Cain and Abel. I do not think there will ever be peace in the Middle East. There has not been in my lifetime. If there was any simple solution to it, it would have occurred by now. Now, I can give you a very pessimistic view, but I believe that all of the noise that we hear about this Gaza-Israel situation, the loud noise, the deafening noise, is overwhelming the world. We know that IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, does not want to occupy all of Gaza. We know that many in the Israeli military, heroes, do not want to do this. There's a great dispute. Or is there really a dispute? Is it just a mask or is it a mess? We don't really know. We're not there. We know there's a raw, emotional, and utterly human pleading around the world, stoppage of starvation and bloodshed. Many of you will say, well, why? I keep saying, why are they taking it out on the innocent Palestinians in the Gaza Strip? Say, well, they're not innocent. Some of them attacked on October 7th. They let Hamas live. Why don't they take over? All of you sit here on your couches in America and in Europe and say, oh, why don't the Palestinians rise up against Hamas? Very easy to say, isn't it? From the comfort of your home. Well, ask yourself why the German people, many of whom hated Hitler, didn't rise up against the Nazi Party, because if they did, they were either beaten to death, disappeared, or put into concentration camps and killed. Those were the Germans who stood up to Hitler. So the same thing with Hamas. Very easy to say they should rise up. It's not going to happen. Say, why don't the Iranians rise up against the mullahs? Same reason. Beatings and death to those who do. So easy to say they should rise up. We can stir up an uprising. That's the stupidest strategy on the planet. It's never going to work. It never did work. It can't work. The average population is just like you and I. We don't want to risk our lives and our families' lives for political reasons. Period. End of story. Easy to say on internet, do this, do that. Very easy to say. So I think this is a disaster, a strategic disaster by Netanyahu, partly justified by a kill or be killed mentality. We can't understand this. It's kill or be killed. It's that simple. This is how he thinks. This is how the warriors, some of them in Israel, think. It's kill or be killed. Okay, this is how they think. If you watch any fights, any martial arts, there are rules. And in any MMA fight, we all watch MMA fights. We've all watched them from the beginning. Very tough men on both sides or tough women on both sides. But when one is clearly defeated and about to be choked to death or have their arm or hand broken or their fingers snapped off, they tap out. And then the civilization that we live in steps in and the referee stops the fight. Now let's go to Ukraine and Russia. Zelensky is not fighting. If he were fighting, he would have tapped out a long time ago. They're now recruiting men over 65 years of age because all the young men have either been killed, captured, or fled Ukraine. Zelensky has nothing to lose. He wants to continue the war. He's not a hero in my mind. He's not George Washington. He's not Winston Churchill. He'd rather see the whole world go up in smoke than this war come to an end. And so Trump said, enough is enough. I want the war over. So he's going to meet with Putin, carve out the territory that's largely Russian-speaking, which will create a Russian zone between Ukraine and Russia, and that will be the end of this war. No, Russia will not next invade Poland or Lithuania. That's bullshit. That's put out by the warmongering neocons on Fox News, that Putin wants to take over the world. If anything, you fools, haven't you seen that he can't even take over Ukraine after all these years? Now he's going to take on the world? Never. Over. So it's not going to happen. He wants what he wanted from the beginning. No NATO on his borders, no missiles aimed at his nation from Ukraine, and go in peace. That's what he wants, and that's what he's going to get. What Zelensky wants and what Zelensky is going to get are two different things. He has no bargaining chips. All he has are the fools in NATO who want war to aggrandize more power. That's all they're doing. They're not afraid of Russia. They know Russia's not attacking Poland, Lithuania, the Baltic states, or France. Russia's not interested in invading Europe or reconquering the old Soviet Union, as the schmucks on Fox News would have you believe, those warmongering heart attack victims. They want to give the whole world a heart attack because they had one. I remind you of what happened when Castro accepted Russian ballistic missiles in Cuba when Kennedy was president. Did we accept missiles aimed at the U.S. from 80 miles offshore on a Cuban island, Cuban-controlled island called Cuba, an island called Cuba? Would we accept those missiles 80 miles from our shore? No. It was a stand-down moment. Kennedy said they have to go. We're not accepting missiles on our border any more than we would accept Mexico permitting Chinese to build missile silos on the border with the United States. Would we accept that? Do you think we would accept that? Even a liberal government here would accept Mexico accepting missiles from Russia or, in this case, China, on the Mexican border aimed at the U.S.? Absolutely not. We'd give them an ultimatum, get rid of them or we're going to go to war with you. Well, that's what Putin did. You don't see it because the media has been lying from the get-go, from the beginning. And we have John McCain, Victoria Nuland, and the other psychopaths, like the Walrus, I called him for years, a warmonger maniac. Bolton, a lunatic, doesn't want peace. All they want is death, destruction, and war. I tried to warn President Trump way back in the first administration when I saw Bolton at Mar-a-Lago circling the smorgasbord, trying to get a meeting and sit down with him. I said, watch out for that guy. He's no good. He's a snake. He just wants war. Well, I turned out to be right. And when Bolton got near him, all he wanted was more war, more war, more war. And that's what you hear, the warmongers. So what we today learn about Ukraine, studying that they're for truce to be signed, Ukraine and Russia, which is why President Trump, I pray to God, is not thrown off course by the warmongers on Fox News, the neocons. As I know, and I know they hate war. They're not looking for killing or being killed or having their friends' guts blown out. Only those in the news media like it because it's good for ratings, or people are that stupid. So now I'm hearing my transmission is not coming through clearly. I can break off and start again. Yes, I want Zelensky to tap out. Yes, that's what I want. I want Zelensky to tap out because he's already tapped out. He's finished. Now, you got people on the line here who are just big shots. I'll buy any one of them a one-way ticket, and I'll even pay for their green shirt to go fight the Russians. Not one of them will do that. I'm sorry if it's glitching. I can't do anything about it. I could discontinue this video and then start again. You're getting buffering and glitching. Okay, so what I think I will do at this point is break off and restart again. Or I will summarize and end it altogether. Sitting Bull, a great warrior of the Lakota, fought like a great warrior for the Native Americans. And when he knew he could no longer defeat the U.S. cavalry, he fled to Canada. And then eventually he came back when his people were starving. Get it? I don't understand how you people can sit there and continue to call for more death and destruction and call yourselves good people. You're not good people. You're sick in the head. You're sick in the head. You're not fighting. You're not bleeding. You're not dying. You're not wearing the red badge of courage. You're sitting on your fat asses in your house saying Zelensky and the Ukrainians should keep fighting the Russians. You're sick in the head. You're an evil person. Very, very sick. And those of you who say all those in Gaza should be expelled and ethnically cleansed, you're as evil as Hitler was, as far as I'm concerned. I'm leveling you with you the way I see it. Do you have any idea what the optics are going to be of 1.2 million people in Gaza, many of them old and sick and women and children with donkeys in a long column? Have you not studied history? Have you not seen drawings and paintings? The great picture by Tissot, which I put on X at A Savage Nation, of the Jews being driven into exile by an ancient king, driven out of Israel. It's a repeat of history in reverse. How can you not see this? How blind can the religious Jews be? Yes, I know I have many trolls here who work for Lockheed Martin and the other manufacturers. They pretend that they're normal, viewers. They're not. They're lobbyists. I know this. I don't care what they say. I'm here to give you my opinion, and I'm trying to tell you that there's a time for peace and a time for war, a time for love and a time for hate. And right now, it's a time for peace. And Trump, to his credit, should get a Nobel Prize when he ends the Ukraine-Russia war on terms good for the world and for the Ukrainians and the Russians. Every poll in Ukraine that's legitimate says they don't want any more war. They're willing to give up the territories, largely Russian-speaking territories. They don't care about it. But you do know that you're supporting a naked dictatorship. There are no elections. There's martial law. And you have the nerve, you Democrats, to say that you're for democracy when you're supporting a crazed dictator in Ukraine who's not George Washington or Winston Churchill, but a petty martinet. I'll stop right there. I don't want to get vulgar. This is all I want to say about him. It's time for him to get off the world stage. He's done enough death and damage to his own people. With the green shirt already. Let him go to Filene's basement to buy a used suit for a midget. I'm sick of this guy. Time for peace. It's a time for peace. Time is now. There's enough death. So you see, 2 million casualties. Not enough for most of you warmongers. 1 million Russians killed. I see other stories. I see 600,000 Ukrainians killed and about 400,000 Russians. It's still overwhelming to me. You're talking about the population of a whole city in America, all dead, maimed, macerated by cluster bombs produced by men and women you probably know here in America. Our cluster bombs, Russian cluster bombs that macerate human flesh. They don't wound. They chop people up like chopped meat. 8 million Ukrainians have fled. They're in Poland and Europe. Whether they'll ever go home is another story. So Trump will get a peace between Russia and Ukraine. Whether or not Zelensky wants it is irrelevant. Zelensky is a fart in the wind right now. He's a fart in the wind. He's gone. Nobody wants to listen to this self-aggrandizing putz with the green shirt already. We've had enough of him. Let him go back to dancing in a club. Not a great world leader. A great world leader would think of his people first, not his ego first. Then you've got the Gaza-Israel thing. Why Trump is allowing this to go on is beyond. It's not beyond me. I kind of know why. He should end that too. Trump should step in and end the Israeli occupation of Gaza City and stop it. He should not permit Netanyahu one more day of war and destruction. And I do understand it's life or death for many in the thinking of Israel. Kill them or they'll kill us. Well, driving them out of the Gaza Strip, tell me how that changes 99.8% of the surrounding population, which is now going to hate you for the rest of their lives and their children's lives. Tell me how. What would you have accomplished if you drive everyone out of Gaza and you have a greater Israel going to the Mediterranean Sea? What would you have accomplished? But more hate unto your children's generation. So it's very difficult for me as an American to sit here and talk about these things because my life is not on the line over there. I get that. But this is one man's opinion. And my job in the media has always been to give my opinion on things for whatever it's worth. And apparently people have appreciated it over these 30 years. And I've given you my opinion. And there is a solution which I've given you for the Gaza, which is do not occupy all of Gaza. I'll repeat it again because it's not my idea. It was floated in the beginning. You create a buffer zone between greater Israel and Gaza. That is, you can't go through it. No man's land. I don't care. Mines, barbed wire, no one will get through it. You carve off northern Gaza. It's basically occupied by Israel now, and make it part of Israel. Fortify it all the way to the sea, and that's the end of that story. And let the people in Gaza rebuild and help them rebuild with all the money that the scumbags in NATO are going to give to Ukraine to kill more people. They should be giving to those in Gaza to rebuild Gaza and to the Ukrainians to rebuild Ukraine. But they're not oriented toward building. They're oriented toward destroying. So that is my opinion. That is only one man's opinion, and that's why I said today's program is called Ukraine, Gaza, and Sitting Bull. And what Zelensky, Putin, Hamas can learn from a great American Indian leader of the past, who was a great warrior, just like some of those in Gaza. Forget those who butchered the children and the women. Some of them are great warriors. Ask the Israelis who fought them. You know, I once knew an Israeli tank commander back in the 70s. He was a third-generation Israeli. I've lost touch with him. I haven't heard from him for 20 years. But I will tell you a story. It's kind of an interesting story. And his name was David. I don't even know if he's still in America. David was a captain. I remember his grandfather fought in war in 48. His father fought in the 50s, and he fought, I believe, in the war in the Golan Heights. He was a tank commander. And he told me he fought the Syrians to the last tank. All of his tanks were destroyed. All his men were killed. The Syrian tank commander, all his men were killed. All the tanks were blown up. And he and David ran towards each other with their guns drawn. And David killed him with what do you call it? A flare gun. Shot him in the chest, with a flare gun. That's all he had. His gun was empty. Killed him with a flare gun. And he said that they're great warriors. He said the Syrians are great warriors. He never denigrated them. He didn't put them down. He didn't make stupid statements that you would hear from people in American media. Great warriors. But he also said something that was very chilling, which has stayed with me forever. Now, remember, he's a Sabra, third-generation Israeli. Grandfather fought in a war. Father fought in a war. He was a tank commander. He said, Michael, in the long run, the sands of the desert will overtake Israel, and we will be gone. That's all I want to say to you. Whether it can be stopped with a population of hatred like this towards the Jews, towards the Israelis, it's out of my hands to even guesstimate what might happen. But that's what he said, whose blood was on the sands of the Golan, said that to me. I'm not here to second guess him. I don't know whether he still believes that. And that's all I have to say today. This is a day of promise, a day of terrible, terrible, terrible fear that greedy manufacturers of weapons, those in the media who like war and death, how many years did I say to you, I coined it, if it burns, it earns? If it burns, it earns. That's Murdoch's. How do you think Murdoch became so powerful? Okay, sex on the covers of his cheap Australian publications, and scandal, and burnings, and shootings, and murder glorified around the world, and sold papers. Then he got a network, and a movie business, and publishing company. It sells. If it burns, it earns. You get it? Well, we, the people, have had enough of it. We don't want any more war, and Donald Trump doesn't want any war. And if you go back to 2015, I said I want a businessman, not a politician. That's why I backed Trump. I also wrote in Trump's war, he's a man of peace, because most businessmen are men of peace. They know that war is bad for business. War is only good for those in the war business. But peace is very good for everyone else in business, in case you don't know it. That's why Trump is 100% right to get a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia on the table, and then maybe let the comedian meet with Putin. If Putin will even sit with him, I doubt it. Putin doesn't want to be around that scumbag. He doesn't like him. Now, you know, may hate Putin. I know you're calling him a dictator, which he is, obviously, and we're supposed to say he's evil. But I've told you over and over again, and I'll say it again. Would this country permit Mexico to put nuclear-tipped missiles in Mexican on the border? No. Did Kennedy, the Democrat liberal, permit Castro to put Russian nukes in Cuba? No. So in that sense, Putin's no different than Kennedy. He said, no, you're not putting missiles on my border in Ukraine. And that's what Zelensky ran on, a peace candidate, a dancer, a singer. I mean, he'll play the piano with his Schmendrick. They said, okay, we'll have a comedian. The Ukrainians didn't want war. And before you knew it, he suddenly became Mr. Walk around the green shirt, you know, flexing the muscles. Oh, my God. And that, there's a word you should learn. A time for war and a time for peace. Hamas and Zelensky can learn from Sitting Bull. He was a brave warrior, and he knew when to fold. You got to know when to hold, and you got to know when to fold. And those in Hamas need to fold, and those in Ukraine need to give it up and fold and go back to the business of being citizen soldiers again, not soldier citizens again. Okay, that's all I have to say. I thank you for listening. If you enjoyed any of this broadcast in these very perilous times, you could find me on X at A Savage Nation. On YouTube, Michael Savage YouTube channel. People still don't know I have a YouTube channel, which I enjoy very much. And I'm on Newsmax TV every Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Tonight's show is great. Actually, I can't wait to see it. The opening 10 minutes are going to set off a shockwave of tonight's TV show. If you haven't seen it yet, I was in Los Angeles at the beginning of the week filming a scene with the great John Voight on the Manhattan Beach Pier. And maybe I should close with the words of Ezra. I played Ezra the fisherman against opposite John, who was fishing on the pier with me. You'll see it tonight. You can't hear the words very well. In the movie that'll be out next January called The Last Firefighter. John plays the last firefighter who's perplexed because he said something wrong to somebody who then hurt them, killed themselves, I think. And he's talking. So he's fishing, and there's a guy on a pier, a Jewish fisherman named Ezra. And they asked me to play Ezra a few weeks before. And I said, sure, I know John. I love John. What a thrill that's going to be for me. And so I went out there, and I'll be in a few scenes, not one. There were like 2 or 3. So the 2 men are sitting on the pier, and they're sitting there. And John says to Ezra, how are they biting this morning, Ezra? And I, Ezra the fisherman, say, biting? I'm afraid the bugs are biting more than the fish. But you never know. Yeshuas Hashem Keref Ayin. You know what that means, I say to John? And John says, what, I'm going to catch a big one tonight? And I smile and I smile. I say, no, it means the salvation of God is like the blink of an eye. God can change one's luck in an instant. There's always hope, he says to John. John says, well, I'm hoping for a big halibut tonight. Then he says, Ezra, do you believe there's a destiny? And Ezra, the fisherman, looks away from the pole, and he says, of course, things are beshert. That's a Yiddish word. Beshert, meant to be. Only God can change one's destiny. So then John, who's tormented inside, says to Ezra, so things are pretty much set in stone, huh? And Ezra looks at him and says, not if God is on your side, and he is on your side. Good mazel, John. And then Ezra sings to himself, and I sang many times. I did it for you on YouTube. The Shalom Alechem Malachei HaSholom Malachei Elyon. That means peace unto you. He's actually singing to the angels. And I sing for peace in the world, is what I've done my whole life. And that tonight is what you will see on Newsmax TV I hope you will tune in. You'll see the interchanges between myself and Mr. Voigt as we filmed on the Manhattan Beach Pier in Southern California, and it ended with my chant of Shalom Aleichem. This is Michael Savage saying, hope to see you tonight on Newsmax TV. In the interim, thank you very much